Hello there everyone, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make this rhinestone chain wire kumihimo bracelet, and this is what mine looks like here. So what we have is a basic kumihimo braid structure, and I'm using fine gauge wire, but multiple lengths per strand that we're using in the braid itself, and you get this effect of it. And then what we do is add in this rhinestone chain in the middle of it as we're making the braid to give this really nice effect, but also add some sparkle to the piece. And this is then what mine looks like on here. So you can see it's quite elegant looking, especially with that sparkle going all the way along. And then what I think could be quite interesting as well is play around with the materials that you use. So for instance, change out the wire for a different colour. That'll give it a different look. But also I really think it would be interesting to play around with what rhinestone chain that you use. So maybe use one that's actually got a colour to it, but still you get that sparkle from it. That would give a really nice and different look, I think. So if you like wire kumihimo designs like this one, make sure you check out my book because it's full of different and interesting wire kumihimo designs, and there's going to be a link for it down in the description box below. But otherwise, if you want to learn how to make this one, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. First of all, I have my square kumihimo because we are making a flat braid structure. And then we of course need our wire. So this here is a 0.4mm silver coated copper wire, and it's a regular round wire as well. And I'm using a silver one just to make it match with my chain, but obviously you can use whatever kind you prefer. And then as for the chain, which is kind of the main feature of the piece, I'm using this rhinestone chain to add a lovely sparkle. So the size of this is 4x4mm in the individual little links there, but you can play around with it a little bit, it doesn't have to be this specific one. And then I'm going to finish off the ends of my braid using these ribbon ends here. So it's going to give a nice professional finish where we have these little loops that we can then attach our findings to. So I'm using a lobster claw clasp and extended chain, and of course jump rings to put it all together. Now I'm going to have a material list in the description box down below along with links as well, so check that out. But otherwise, let's get all the materials ready here and then let's get started. Now then we need to cut some lengths of our wires so we can start braiding. What I have here is 32 lengths of about 45 centimeters each. So that's quite a few lengths here, but because it's a very fine gauge wire that we're using to braid with, we're going to actually work with several wires at a time as if they were one, so basically work with them in groups. And then also what I've done is towards one end I've made sure they're all even, and then I put some electrical tape around the end there to hold them together, and then I just bent the very ends back just to avoid them pulling through as we start off the braid. And then as for the chain here, I'm not really using a specific length because it can be kind of hard to know exactly how much you're going to need. So what I like to do is basically just use the length that I have, and then I'm going to cut it off once I get to the end. So it just makes it a little bit easier without having to waste too much or maybe not have enough. So then we need to attach our wires to our disc here. So I have my kumihimo disc ready. Then I'm going to take all my wires, and then that taped end I'm going to put down through the hole in the center of the disc. And then we basically just need to distribute all the lengths here into the slots. So what I'm going to do is make sure I'm using groups of 4 wires at a time, and I'm holding on to that taped end right underneath the disc, on the back side of the disc there. First of all, I'm just going to start from one end, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to take the first 4 wires here, then we're going to bring them towards the top. And what we need to do is place them into the slots, so we're going to end up with the right position obviously. So a group of 4 goes into a slot at the top. Then we're going to take another group of 4. So again, like I said, I'm starting from this side and just working my way towards the right. So just kind of keeping the wires where they're more or less naturally coming out from the tape there. Don't need to take wires from the right side and cross them over towards the left of the disc here. And then place this group in the opposite slot on the bottom, and then basically just keep separating out 4 wires at a time as a group and then placing them into the slot. So now I attached all my wires to the disc, and what we ended up with is basically the groups of wires. First of all, there's 4 wires in each group like I mentioned, but then on the top here we've ended up with 4 groups in the 4 middle slots, and then the same on the bottom, we have 4 groups of 4 wires in each group there in the 4 middle slots on the bottom of the discs. And then this is what this setup looks like. And we then need to start making the braid here. So what I'm going to do first of all is make a section of braid without adding any chaining, because we need to use that to finish off the ends with. And also the braid structure that I'm using is a cross kumihimo braid structure. So to do that, we need to start with the top of the disc. So I'm going to take the 2 middle ones there, just do one at a time. I'm going to take the right one out of the 2 middle ones on the top of the disc and then just smooth it out. Now don't pull too hard because you can risk pulling the wires through that tape. Even though we bent them back, they're still only fine gauge wires. Then I'm taking that right one of the 2 middle ones, bringing it out towards the left side, kind of smoothing them out as I do that. And then I take the left one of those 2 middle ones, just the group, always moving them as if they were one wire. Obviously we need to be aware that there's multiple wires in there, but it's the movement of all the same as if it was just one. But then smooth them out, and that also helps them lie flat next to each other which is going to make them sit nicely in the braid and warms them up as well. And then place that group out into the right side of the disc. Now we need to start moving all the bottom and the top ones, and imagine that you have a line down through the center of the disc there, so you kind of have a right side on that side there and a left side here. I'm just going to start on the left one. Doesn't really matter what side you start with, but out of the two middle ones on the bottom of the groups there, take that left one and then bring it over the middle, smooth it out with your fingers, again not pulling too hard, but then just gently also press it in the middle there as you bring it over to the top into the very opposite slot. So out of the two middle ones that are empty into the left one. Then when you take the next one out on the top, smooth that out, then bring that down and then into the empty slot on the bottom, and then the next one out on the bottom here, just smooth that out gently. It's especially important just to be a bit gentle here in the beginning couple of rounds, because that's when you have more risk of pulling the wire through the tape. Once we've done a few rounds, it's not going to be as important because they're going to be kind of stuck within the braid structure. So that's that side. And then on the other side, the right side of the disc, we do the same thing, but obviously on the opposite side. So take the right one, group that out of the two middle ones, release it, smooth it out with my fingers, and then bring it over the middle towards the top into that empty slot on the top there. Then I take the next one out, smooth it out, and just make sure they're laying kind of flat next to each other as much as I can. They will still be crossing over and under each other a little bit, but just avoid it as much as possible. Make it as nice and even as possible there. Then the next one out goes to the top of the disc into the empty slot on the right side there. So now we just need to bring the side groups back into the braid. So I'm just going to take one at a time, doesn't matter what side you start with, release it, and then just gently press against it on the side of the braid there to help tighten it up a bit, and then place it into the empty slot to the right of the bottom ones. And on the left side we do the same, release it, and then gently press against it as we then bring it down, smooth them out, and into the left slot next to the other ones. Now this is one full round of our braid structure, and what you want to do now is repeat this a few times so we have a short little length. So now I made several rounds of my braid here, and you can see the braid starting to form underneath the disc. And also what I just want to mention is this is where I always hold on to the braid as I'm doing wire kumihimo. I don't really hold on to the disc because I feel by holding on to the braid under here in the beginning onto that little tape section, but otherwise I keep moving up and holding on to the braid right underneath that hole in the middle of the disc, I feel that it gives far more control. So that's where I hold the braid as I'm making it, moving all these wires. But then we now have that little length, so we can actually now start adding in our chain. Now what I just recommend that you do as well is you just want to open up the groups of wire here a little bit. Just give a little bit more spacing to basically more or less just make room for the chain, because we need to be able to kind of fit it in there and then also work around it, because then I have my chain ready. So I'm starting from the one end here. Then I want to put that very first link down between the two groups on the bottom here. So just down between them, so that first little link with the stone in is sitting basically just below where all the wires are coming out to the slots on the disc, and then kind of trapping it in place there. And then I have the rest of the chain just going up on the top of the disc just like that for now. And then I just have my thumb underneath it, just gently holding on to it. If you can do that, that helps a bit as well. So now for the next movement, we need to keep making the same braid structure, but obviously because we're incorporating the chain into it, it's going to just be a little bit different. So I'm going to start in the same way, start with out of the two middle groups there. On the top, I'm going to start with the right one, always starting from the same side. Then bring that down, and then go and smooth it out just like all the other times. Then as I bring this down and out to the side, the left side of the disc, I'm now bringing it down the side of the chain, but then in front of the chain, as I'm bringing it to the side, still smooth it out. And then I make sure that this group of wires lay right in between the first and the second link. And then otherwise, just make sure the wires are sitting correctly here. Bring it out to the side and into the slot. And you can just push the chain a bit to the other side so we can get to the other group here. So that's the left one. Again, bring that down the side of the chain and just smooth it out with your fingers, and then bring it in front of the chain to then come out to the right side of the disc and into the slot. And now your chain is also kind of stuck in there, so you can't just pull it out, so you don't need to hold on to it so much under the disc now. But then for the rest of this round here, I'm just gonna do the exact same movement. So I take out the two middle ones at the bottom, the left one first of all, because I just start on the left side, and then I want to make sure that this chain is kind of out of my way, so I don't incorporate that on this side here. So just bring this group into the opposite slot. The next one out goes into the slot on the bottom, and then next one out into the slot on the top. And then what we can do for the other side, I just move the chain a little bit to the left now so it doesn't get caught up, and otherwise do all the same movements. So making sure that that chain basically stays in the middle. So just like this, move all the groups to the opposite side, and then we just want to bring the side groups back into the braid by bringing them to the bottom slots there. And then we have our 4 groups of wires on the top and the bottom back in the original setup. And then we have this length of chain kind of still just hanging out there in the middle. So this is going to keep being loose, and we're just going to keep moving it around as we need to. Then I just want to open up my wires a little bit again, just again to make space for the chain, because it is wire that we're working with. It's not quite like cord where obviously it's soft and it molds around what you're doing. Here you kind of need to maneuver the wire into the position that you want. So I just need to bring my chain a little bit around so it sits properly, because then for the next step we now need to do the same, except the chain is going to be in a little bit of a different position. So before we start making that next round, I need to move the chain. So I just bring my whole length over the disc, basically towards the bottom of the disc here. Now because it's wire, obviously be a bit careful, we don't want to break any of the chain or anything, but what we need to do is push this a bit so this comes towards the bottom here, but making sure constantly that the back of the chain is always facing towards the top of the disc, and the front with the crystals here are facing towards the bottom of the disc. So obviously make sure that they end up facing outwards. So just like that here. Now for the next round, make the same movements, except now as I take the right one out of those two middle ones on the top, I smooth it out, and then I bring it behind the chain. So just however you need to kind of place your wires in position to go kind of mold around the chain to fit it nicely. Just do that throughout, like I said, because it's wire, we kind of need to do that rather than it being cord. And then the left one of the two also goes behind that chain, and then out to the side. And then otherwise it's the same thing. So all the bottom and the top ones need to move to the opposite sides. One group at a time here. While that chain is just kind of hanging out towards the bottom of the disc, making sure that it's out of the way when we move these top and bottom ones, so we don't get it mixed up. Just like this. Move all the groups, and then bring in the side ones so we have the original setup again. Move the chain if you need to, and then we're ready for the next round. So there we just go back to the point where we need to move the chain now back to the top. Before I do, it can help just to kind of widen the groups of wires a little bit to make sure we have room for that chain, and lift it to the top and just kind of let it hang towards the top of the disc. And then now what we need to do is start the next round, and that's in the exact same way as before. So we have the chain going towards the top of the disc. So what we need to do is take the right one out of those two middle groups on the top, bring it down and smooth it out. Then as I bring it towards the left side, I bring it in front of the chain, and now we need to again bring it between two links, but obviously it's the next link up. So it's not the same ones that we went between before, but it's the next one up. make sure the group of wires that goes in between the links. Because then when we went behind with the wires, they actually went behind the link, kind of the crystal part of it. Whereas here they're going in between them when they're being brought towards the front, and you're constantly moving up to the next one. So that left one then goes up to the right side again between the same links. And then otherwise you just move the rest of the groups in the exact same way. As you can see there, just gently use your fingers, smooth out your wires, and then finish off this round again. So keep alternating between, like in this group, this round here rather, we have the chain towards the top of the disc. And in the next round I'm going to then bring it down, make sure to kind of just mold it in place and make space for it, bring it down so it hangs out the bottom of the disc here. And then we go behind the chain. Then I keep alternating like that throughout. So we end up basically incorporating the chain into the braid. So it's going to sit there nice and securely. That's the kind of whole purpose of it. Just keep going like this until you have the length that's including the chain that you want. So now I kept going here, and then what I've reached now is the length that I want for the section of my braid with the chain in. So actually what I want to do now is get rid of the excess, and also the last round that I did was where I went in front of the previous link there. So if I was just going to continue now, I was going to go behind the next link, but before I do that I'm actually going to get rid of the chain. So after that very last link that you have more or less incorporated into the braid, just down there, I'm going to get my wire cutters here, flush cutters, and I want to just go between that link and the next one and basically just cut off the excess of the chain as far close to that first one, just like that here. Because that's why I said it's easier to work with a longer length of chain than what you're going to need, because first of all it's hard to know how much you need, but also you literally just cut off the excess once you reach the length that you want. But then now what you want to do is just continue with the braid for a bit, because we need to make a length with just the chain just like we have in the beginning there. So same braid structure. So technically the next one here, next round, will go behind that very last link that's kind of a little bit loose in the braid. And if it will continue with the chain, obviously, it'll be going behind it there. But this is pretty much then the last round where we are kind of incorporating the chain, and then after this we're just going to do a few more rounds with just the wire, like I said, just like the beginning, so we get that length again that we can then use to finish it off with. So once we have the braid completely done, we can just take it off the disc. Because it's wire, we don't need to worry about the braid unraveling or anything. So literally just release all the lengths here from your disc, and then we can just remove it, and then you have your finished braid. So if you're happy with how this looks, you can of course leave it like this, but what I personally like to do is take some flat nose pliers here and then just help even it out a little bit. So I just start from one end, it doesn't matter which one. And then what I like to do is go in basically and kind of flatten it out, because you're going to be able to see there's probably a bit of a shape in it. So I put my flat nose pliers starting on one side, and then I just literally kind of squeeze it. So flatten it out and make it nice and even as well. So just do the other side too. Flatten that out, and you can also then straight away see a bit of a difference in the look of it. So if you kind of flatten the sides out like this, and what you can also do to help make it more even is go in if you need to just kind of the sides in anyway, so you can squeeze them in a little bit to make sure that the sides of them become as straight as possible. Obviously you just keep going all the way up along the side. You can do a bit on either side at a time and just work your way up. Also then to see if you need to tighten anything, so squeeze anything a bit there to make them more even all the way along. And I find that gives it a bit of a neater look to it as well. So just keep doing that if you want to, but then otherwise then you have your finished main part of the braid, and all we've got to do really is shape it and finish off the ends. So then to finish off the ends here, what I'm going to be using are these ribbon ends, which then have loops on so we can attach our findings. So in order to get them on the ends, we first of all got to get rid of the excess wire here. So to do that, I'm just going to get my flush cutters, and because this is wire, we don't have to worry about the braid coming undone like I said when we took it off the disc. It's the same when we cut off the excess here. You can literally just cut straight across the braid, and it'll still keep its shape, so it's not going to come undone there. Then this ribbon end is going to fit nicely right there on the end, but I do also need to just add a little bit of glue to it. So I then use my E6000 here, and then I just like to get a little bit on a toothpick. Doesn't have to be too much because it's going to come spilling out anyway. And then I put that inside of the ribbon end first of all. Make sure to cover the inside walls there. And then whatever I have left on my toothpick, I like to then put on the very end of the actual braid. Just so when we put the two pieces together, they adhere nicely. And try and get it in between all the nooks and crannies of the actual wire as well, to make it as secure as possible. Then I put the two things together by putting the ribbon end there on the end of the braid, holding it in place to stop it from moving too much, and then I take my flat nose pliers and then just start squeezing this down. And I don't go into one place and make a big bend. I like to kind of do a little at a time, go from side to side until it's almost all the way down. Then I just take my fingers away and double check that it's still in the middle, because it can move a little bit while we're squeezing it down here. So if you need to readjust it, then do that. But otherwise, when you're happy with it, then do your final squeeze. So it's nice and tight. And also I like to go in from the sides there as well. Then obviously you want to let this dry and do the same thing with the other end as well. Attach your findings to these little loops then, and then all that's left to do is shape it. So now I've finished off both ends and I've got my findings on there as well. Then to shape it, what we can do is either shape it around something that has the size and shape you want it to have, or you can just use your hands and fingers. So that's what I'm going to do here. So you just want to go into a place and start putting a curve into it. So don't go into one place and put a big bend into it. It's going to put it out of shape. But rather gradually here, work with the braid, putting a gradual curve into it, obviously with the chain facing outward. And go from side to side, so we'll gradually end up bringing the two ends closer together, so we can then obviously end up using the clasp. So now that I've finished shaping it here, then this is what it looks like. And then obviously we can just use the clasp, and it's ready to wear. Now what I just want to mention here at the end as well is the very last links, you might find that the last one might be a little bit loose. So I've found on mine here that one of them, you can see, is a little bit loose like that, whereas the other one isn't really. So it really all depends how yours end up. Now here I feel like that's fine, but what you can do if you find that you have one or two of them that are a bit loose on the end there, you can always just take a little bit of the same glue, and then obviously use the toothpick again here, just add a bit of glue, make sure to kind of open it up underneath the link and obviously on the wire underneath it there, and then push it down and make sure it then dries while it's pushed down, and that will then help hold it in place. And I recommend doing that after you've shaped it here as well, so it's all in place. But again, only really if it's necessary, so that's completely up to you. So now my bracelet is complete, and then this is what mine looks like. So obviously it can look very different depending on what materials that you choose to use, especially if you want to mix up the chain a little bit as well. So if you like wire kumihimo designs, do make sure you check out my book, because there's loads of new and interesting designs in that. I'm going to leave a link in the description box down below. But otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.